Contagious diseases are part of human history, and there's a nexus between disease, culture, and politics. Now, these are the top 5 things you probably didn't know about the cultural and political history of contagious diseases. Welcome to my channel, and here's number 1. A pandemic coming from Asia is nothing new. Let's start with a plague that has caused so much trouble all over Europe. It was the so-called tarragon marmot that was hunted by nomadic peoples in Eastern Asia. When people got infected and the disease spread all over Asia, it followed the Silk Road to the west until the disease finally arrived at the Mediterranean and from there to the European mainland. And there's a reason why in the medieval ages the plague never made it to the Americas, because the host animals in Europe, that was the rats, that is, the fleas living on the rats. And the rats, when Columbus sailed to America, he used sailing ships, and the sailing ships need several months to make it to America, and that was too long for the rats. They never survived. While with steamships, the rats had a good chance to survive the passage and then spread the disease. Number 2, naming the disease. That's also very interesting. Let's take the syphilis. The syphilis is not caused by a virus, but by a bacteria. In any way, it's a contagious disease that caused so much horror in Europe. And it's interesting to see here that every nation named the syphilis after the neighboring nation. So for the Portuguese, it was the Castilian disease. For the French, it was the Spanish disease. For the Poles, it was the German disease. And for the Russian, it was the Polish plague. Number 3, contagious diseases and culture. The syphilis is at the beginning of a new era in France, that is the Rococo. And in the Rococo, people had a penchant for huge wigs, lace, jabots, gloves, and layers of powder. And one reason why people develop this penchant is the syphilis, because the syphilis causes certain bumps and deformation in the bone, and people at that time try to gloss it over. Number 4, conspiracy theories. Conspiracy theories and all kind of weird esoteric theories that explain the disease. For example, in medieval Europe, we find these heavy outbreaks of anti-Semitic attacks. This has something to do with a certain reading of the Bible, and maybe I will make another video of that. And also, this was the reason, or at least the occasion, why Jews were put into these ghettos to isolate them from the rest of society. And later on in the 20th century, there were theories that AIDS was coming from outer space, or that AIDS was created in Russian or American gene labs. All kind of weird stuff you find at that time. And number 5, I think that's the most interesting aspect of contagious diseases in history. In my first video, Does Europe Exist?, I mentioned the phantom borders and the rift between Eastern and Western Europe and so on. And one reason why there is this rift has something to do with the plague. Because simply when so many people died, it came to a scarcity of labor force. And the remaining peasants took to the streets, were demonstrating for higher wages, less unpaid labor. In England, there was even a peasants' revolt in 1381, and all of this was at the beginning of more inclusive institutions, more better wages, and generally an improvement of peasants in Western Europe. While in Eastern Europe, there was also, due to the plague, a scarcity of labor force, but there the feudal landlords reacted to this by expanding their ownership of land. So more land got more concentrated into few hands, and the labor force, the peasants, actually couldn't improve their lives. Rather the opposite, their lives deteriorated. And what added to this was the fact that in Eastern Europe, the towns and cities were less populous than in Western Europe and less likely to become hotspots of unrest. When the plague was over, there was a trading boom in Western Europe, and the goods mainly came from Eastern Europe. And in this process, Western Europe and Eastern Europe were even more drifting apart. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you soon.